My experience of performing live used to go one of two ways. Either driving home from a gig with a warm feeling of how well it went, or a feeling of frustration of why I didn't get it together that night. Now, I'm talking largely about how well I felt I improvise, but this could be any aspect of musical performance, from accompanying someone to remembering arrangements, or simply just being more present in the moment. If we are to play at our absolute best on the guitar, I think we have to learn to let go of some of the things that really aren't as important as we might think. For me, it's a question of having the right mindset. Some call it the so-called elusive state of flow. For some, this is a mystery that just happens sometimes, as everything just happens to line up and we play to our peak level. Now, playing can feel like an out-of-body experience when it works like this. We really feel the energy of the music and it all just happens. But what about the rest of the time when things don't click? Is that avoidable? How can we perform consistently at our best? Even if you never take to a stage, at some point you still need to take what you're learning and apply it in a performance-based manner. Now, I don't think this topic has adequately been answered definitively. So let me share with you how I learned to deal with this. I'll share 3 strategies that you can use to improve your performance levels. I think the first thing we have to establish is trust in our ability, that the time in the practice room stands for something. When we place trust in our ability, the music happens with less mental chatter. Now, most of us wouldn't type staring at the keyboard like this. Why would you play guitar like that? I hope you don't type like that.
Hey, give me a break, I'm only 8.
When we type, it's an act of trust that our muscle memory kicks in. If someone gave me a blank keyboard and instructed me to write on where all of the letters and characters are, I couldn't do it, apart from a few obvious ones. Yet I can still type without ever really needing to look at the keyboard. Now, some aspects of our playing comes down to mechanics and muscle memories. However, once a platform of technique is established and we've practiced what we are trying to perform sufficiently, we then have to trust ourselves to do these things. For me, this takes us from being a technician to a musician. When I used to teach complete beginner guitar players, I would encourage them pretty early on to work on chord changes without looking. Or as they struggled with chord changes, I'd ask them, stop trying so hard. It's getting in the way. And they'd often look at me and as if I'm crazy, either thinking, well, if I do that, it's not going to work, or more likely thinking, I don't really want to make a mistake and make a fool of myself in front of you. Now, it's amazing the difference this would make when they put less effort in or they stopped looking at their hand movements so much. If they'd done that work in the practice room, then they had to move on to trusting their ability. This then opened them up to a higher state of musical awareness. They were less focused on getting it right or the mechanics of it, and started to notice the tactile nature of playing music and the quality of the sounds they were producing. This can be a game changer in terms of guitar playing. Now, we do this all the time in our daily lives without thinking. Whether it's driving, brushing our teeth, it's just, when it comes to guitar, there's a hell of a lot of ego and self-worth wrapped up in playing music, more than we sometimes care to admit. So what happens? We doubt ourselves, and to avert the danger of getting things wrong, we do things like death staring the fretboard and overthinking everything we are doing. This also leads to us not being present in the moment, which when it comes to performance, that's a massive problem. If I'm playing on a gig, provided I practice the material enough, I don't worry about what might go wrong or how I'm getting on. I just have to put trust in my ability to perform the music. This eliminates a level of mental chatter that simply obstructs our natural musical instincts. If I let those old unhelpful ways of thinking go and just trust my ability, I'll be more relaxed and able to concentrate on what matters. Now, on to my second tip. So what separates out one jazz guitar player from another for you? Is it their certain use of a scale? Is it their speed, or maybe even their technique? I wouldn't say so. The players that speak to me do so through their creativity and ability to improvise a melody that feels more like a story than simply a solo or technical exercise. It's why I've never been big on shredding. Now check out this quote from Albert Einstein, who was also a great music lover and violinist, and he had this to say about creativity and imagination. I think we can relate this really easily to the struggles we often experience when studying and learning jazz guitar. Jazz improvisation is essentially being creative with the knowledge that we've acquired, with that knowledge being everything we've worked on, from arpeggios to scales to jazz language to the musicians you've played with, the songs you've learned, the solos you've transcribed. This knowledge of music and jazz is very important to understand the music we play. But there's a danger that it can just sit as knowledge, as information that never seems to then translate into music as we would hope it to, or expect it to. That comes when we strive to be creative with it and create something with it. Now, all of these topics are ways of describing or thinking about jazz improvisation. And I found I didn't play at my best when a degree of mental chatter around these topics filled my mind. I had to let go of these things when it came to performing. I'd set myself up to fail when I thought things, right, oh, time to try that lick I've been working on here, or what about using this arpeggio substitution on the 2 chord coming up? For me, it's the equivalent of having a conversation with someone and then giving them a running commentary on the language you are using. So for me, once I was able to relinquish the fear of making a mistake and put trust in myself, my ability and what I've practiced, I then have to avoid the problem of overthinking everything. Now, I do this through 2 simple methods. Firstly, I just search for the sounds I want on that chord. Secondly, I sing or hum what I play, either aloud or just mentally. Now, both will tap into the knowledge that I've acquired over the years, the songs I've learned, the solos that I've transcribed, the music I've listened to, the musicians I've played with, but I don't actively think about them because that knowledge can't just suddenly magically translate into a solo. You have to learn to be imaginative with it, to be creative with it. And for me, when you improvise, each phrase, it should open the door to the next, and it should just unravel like a good story. Now, providing I know the changes to the song, and by that I mean really know them and have internalized them, I should be able to create a melody over them. If I can't, I simply don't know the song well enough, or I'm overthinking things. Here's a tip for you to work on this. A technique I use sometimes is singing solos over backing tracks in the car, providing I'm the only person in that car. Now, this for me helped me practice the headspace I need to perform and think less about the instrument and more about the melodies I want to create. Now, some would say that the guitar isn't even an instrument, that we are, and there's sense in that. The best musicians, as a result, can often make music on almost any instrument. Now, you might be thinking this is all geared around performance and you might not perform very often, and I do think it's important we here make a distinction between practice and performance. Now, sometimes we need to work on technical things. Sometimes we have to work on exercises. Those things are more like traditional music practice. They have a place, and they require what I would describe as an active mindset to really ensure that you pay attention to the details of everything that you're doing, giving yourself all the right sort of constructive feedback. But in your practice session, sometimes you need to change gear to performance mode and try and play, say, a piece all the way through, or to improvise for a set amount of time. You could challenge yourself to play without the music if you always play with the music, and try and just not overthink, just trust your ability and see what happens. And remember that when things don't go so well, rather than that being a reflection on your ability, it's a point for further learning, a point for development. It's not a reflection on you as a guitar player. If everything's going swimmingly, you probably aren't progressing. So at times in your practice, make the distinction between what you might classify as practice material and what might be more performance-based. For me, a performance has a different kind of energy to practice, and you have to be receptive really to the elements of music to really harness that energy. Now, it can be difficult to find opportunities to perform. You can always play for friends or family members at informal occasions, or just when someone comes to your house. You can always record videos and send it to someone for their feedback, or just for that sort of accountability and feeling of, I'm going to send this to someone, so I want to try and perform it for them. So obviously those things could be beneficial, but one of the best things you can do is really look to actually play with somebody else. Now, you could look either for a local jam session or look for musicians locally. I feel that if you've never played this music with anyone else, then you're definitely missing out on one of the greatest things you can experience. Don't let your ego or fear of playing badly put you off doing this. It's such a great way to learn just by playing with others. You'll develop your sense of timing, the ability to lock in rhythmically with someone else, and you just have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. And letting go of these things, all these like ego-related things, say all the mental chatter. When you perform, when you play with others, it just opens you up to growing as a musician. Now, finally, on a less serious note, I find that I actually perform much better when I've eaten. I do not like performing on an empty stomach, and anyone that's played with me will know this only too well. Well, anyway, I'm curious to know what you think about the topic of today's video. Are you guilty of anything I've mentioned, or do you have any tips around this topic that other viewers might find useful? Don't forget jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday. If you'd like to learn more with me, then you can check the description for information about my Patreon page, where we do deep dives into jazz standards. If you'd like to watch another video from myself about other problems we have with learning jazz guitar, then I'll put one up on the screen now for you. 5 progress problems with jazz guitar, 5 mistakes that I made, things that you might be experiencing too. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, you take care.